Hi, Raffaella. Welcome to Campus Talks.
Hi, good morning.
You have carved an impressive career as a chemical engineer, which has taken you from the small village in Campania in southern Italy, where you grew up, all the way to Edinburgh. So, what drew you to chemical engineering?
Well, when I grew up, I didn't know at all what was chemical engineering. And mathematics was really my favorite subject since very early age. Then when I went to high school, I started to study chemistry, and chemical reactions really looked a little bit like mathematics to me. They were really very much governed by very logical rules. So the time came that I had to go to the university, and I thought, oh, well, probably I can put together mathematics and chemistry so that I can do something that I really like. And I thought, well, chemical engineering probably is going to give me this opportunity. I have also to confess, I discovered later on that in chemical engineering, there wasn't so much chemistry like I expected, but I enjoyed it. And that was really what brought me forced into chemical engineering. I think that I chose engineering, especially because I wanted something which was analytical, but also creative. And I thought that, engineering would give me the opportunity really to transform what I learned in practical solutions. Of course, at home, my mom wanted me to become a teacher, mathematics teacher. But I think I always looked at my dad. And for me, my dad was not trained as an engineer. He was, for me, the quintessential engineer because he had skills, attitude, really to solve practical problem. So he could fix anything. And he fixed things in our household and toys for me and my brother. And I think that later on he fixed even my beloved shoes. So I started chemical engineering really by chance. And a little bit of a reflection here. It makes me thinking that we should not leave this to chance. We should really do something to help youngsters to understand what chemical engineering can do.
Lucky for the world, I guess, that you did stumble upon this discipline. It sounds like your dad, obviously being a dab hand at sort of fixing things, a great talent to have, would have provided some inspiration there. But can you give us a quick run through of your career and the journey that you have been on to get you to where you are now?
Sure. I really think that even academia to me came as a chance. I went to university thinking that really I wanted to work in an industry, in a chemical industry. But then during my final year as an undergraduate, I did my research project, and I had another role model, I should say. My supervisor was really so enthusiastic about research. He really loved research, and he loved also teaching. So I thought, I would like to do something like him. And he encouraged me to do a PhD. So I went to Princeton, and this was the very first big change in my life. So I took the opportunity to change completely from my rural town where I grew up to go to a town in the States. The first time I took an airplane, to be honest. And then I did my PhD at Princeton, and I came back to Naples as a lecturer. However, I think that times at Princeton and really changed my view of academia. What I thought was academia when I was in Italy was different in the United States. And I think that coming back, I had a little bit of a different views that didn't really went well with what the reality was in Naples at the time. So again, my supervisor, my earlier supervisor, who in the meantime had become my boss, encouraged me to do something different, to look outside my department in Naples. And when this opportunity at Nottingham, actually, for a readership came about, he encouraged me to apply. And I have to be honest, I didn't want to move to England. I didn't think I liked the weather. I didn't think I liked the food. I really didn't want to move. But the opportunity I had at Nottingham were great. And I thought also that, why not? Why don't we try to do something different? So Nottingham was really great, actually. they supported me a lot. And in 1998, I was headhunted by Elliott Watt and for a chair position. And I was relatively young at the time. So I thought, why not? And let's try and let's move to Edinburgh. Again, the weather probably was not exactly what I expected, but Edinburgh is a beautiful city. And I have to say that Elliott Watt was very supportive. And since then, I've been here enjoying Elliott Watt. But also, I think that the other thing that I have done a lot in my career is networking, seeing other people, interacting with the world. And I think that my previous experience in the States and in Italy have given me much more a possibility to explore different realities. And that has helped a lot during all my career, actually.
Has the weather and the food proven as terrible as you feared?
Well, actually, you have to remember that I moved in 1995 to England and then in 1999 to Scotland. And I have to say at the beginning, food was not good at all. But things have changed so much in the UK. And I think that things have really improved a lot food-wise. But also, I think that importantly, I realized that if you really like your work, if you really like your life and your friends, the weather is not really so important. So I really can say that I'm extremely happy that I moved to the UK, and I like the weather and the food.
Yeah, I think that's a good message. Career fulfillment outweighs fear of clouds and rain.
Yeah.
Just coming back then to your career, you mentioned that you went and did a PhD in Princeton, first time you've been on an aeroplane. I mean, that must have just been a major or steep learning experience from every angle. Can you perhaps touch on some of the things you took away from that? Were there any really acute lessons that you think that gave you?
Yes, that helped me to become persistent and also to be much more open to change. I have to be honest, my very first years at Princeton were a bit miserable. I couldn't speak English. I don't think that my English is much better today, but at the time I couldn't speak at all. So I couldn't understand really my teachers. I had to work extremely hard to read my books, to study. And I think that helped me in becoming very persistent and to say, if I really want something, I have to work hard. And of course, I missed my family, I missed my friends. And if you don't speak well the language, it's also difficult to make new friends. And Princeton, I have to say, was very, very competitive as an environment. So yes, my life was a bit hard. I learned mainly that I had to work hard and sometimes suffer a bit if I really want to succeed in what I wanted to do.
Yes, not having the fluency or a good grasp of a language is incredibly isolating, and that's before one even considers that you were also trying to study extremely, complex and challenging academic questions. If you're going to come away from that successfully, it is with resilience and determination in hand, which I think most people working in higher education today would say is a prerequisite to doing well. So you came to the UK. Well, you went back to Italy first and then came to the UK. Can you talk us through a bit of what your research actually focuses on and your current work?
My work focuses mainly on multi-phase systems. I look at reactors, for instance, where you have particles and gas or liquid flowing within the reactors. And probably the easiest way to give an example would be to consider catalysis, so heterogeneous catalysis. So what I focus on is just to understand the physics which dictates the behavior of large reactors. And my expertise was applied to the petrochemical industries, where I studied fluid catalytic cracking, which are the big equipment that actually crack the oil to give all the different products that we use. And then eventually I applied my expertise to other fields, because as we move from fossil fuels towards renewables, I realized that what I learned and what I know as fundamental science and really fundamental chemical engineering applied to these multi-phase systems can be of help and can guide also towards other processes, like, for instance, production of hydrogen from biomass that I have been working more recently on, as well as cracking of ammonia. So all processes, large-scale processes that actually are in the arena of energy. So that's essentially what I do.
And that's a great example of where years of research and accruing expertise in one area can then be incredibly useful in providing insights and guidance on real-world applications that are absolutely fundamental to our future now. I've also read that you have a keen interest in the ethics of engineering, and I just wondered in what sense and what work you've done in that space.
My interest in ethics came out a little bit by chance. And I remember that some years ago, probably about 20 years ago now, we started to think that there was a need, especially the Royal Academy of Engineering at the time was putting together a working party about the education, how much we use ethics in our engineering degrees. And that was really an interest to me, because I have a brother who is a philosopher. So I wanted to show him that an engineer can work with something which is more about philosophy, like ethics. So I was interested in that, but I was interested mainly because I wanted to make sure that the technology that we develop are responsible, and responsible to the environment, responsible to the human being. So essentially, the work that I have done in ethics, and I continue to do, is very much orientated towards how we develop responsible technologies and how we can foresee unwanted consequences that our work can generate. Very often, we work in area that we believe can bring wealth and well-being to people. However, there might be some misuse of those technologies, some unwanted consequences in the use of our technologies that probably we cannot see when we first develop that. So I think it's that perception, but more than perception, that thinking of how this can go wrong, or am I doing the right thing now? And the dilemma that sometimes comes from using some products instead than others, and how those products are really good for us or for the environment. I think that all that considerations are really central to the way we do engineering, and that's why I have an interest in ethics.
I think we can all be comforted in the knowledge that those questions are being asked. Now, there are lots of statistics out there highlighting the imbalance between men and women in STEM disciplines. Minority groups are also woefully underrepresented, and progress in addressing certainly the gender disparity in some areas of engineering seems to have slightly stagnated in recent years, despite repeated initiatives and pronouncements about addressing the imbalance. So, what do you think is going on here?
It's a very important thing that you just mentioned. You mentioned a number of initiatives, and yes, we have a number of initiatives, but despite that, the pace at which we advance in this area is really, really depressing. And I think that this is a consequence of a combination of different factors. So, to me, the most important point is that you have really a systemic and very well organized approach to the problem. What I mean, let me give you an example. We'll start from the very beginning. And of course, there is the perception that engineering is still seen as a masculine profession. So that is the first barrier. And then even if women enroll in STEM programs, they do not remain long enough, because I think that there is a problem mainly around mid-career stage. That's the very difficult one. When there are structural pressures like work-life balance challenges, probably caregiving responsibility, less supportive workplace, and so on. So at that point, you start to lose women. And this means also that women do not get very much into leadership positions. And probably, although I have to say that I have been at least in 2 out of 3 places where I have been working, like permanent staff, I have been very lucky in terms of support from my institutions. I have to say that probably institutions do not support very much women. And also the fact that there is a pay gap, still a pay gap, this makes impossible to advance. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we really want effective solutions, we have to have a coordinated action. And this coordinated action has to be taken across various levels, including the education, the hiring, the workplace culture. We need more sustained mentorship and sponsorship, the policy that support more work-life balance and equitable advancement. So I think that if we really want to have more women in our workplace and in engineering, we have to have the coordinating support towards all the career trajectories. Many interventions, but from my point of view, still patchy and not very systematic.
Right. So an initiative addressing one particular element might have some effect, but if it isn't then joined up with efforts to address other challenges, if it remains in isolation, it won't have a great long-term impact because you'll simply lose people at another stage. This may sound facetious, but I think it's an important thing to ask. Why does it matter if there are more men than women in these disciplines? Why should we care about creating a greater gender balance?
Diversity for me, it's what we really need. Now, I know that we are speaking about women in engineering, but I would like to advocate that what we really need in engineering, it's diversity. It's diversity because at one point, if we have more inclusive representations, it means that we have diverse teams, and that means that we can enhance innovation and we can solve better problems because we bring a wider range of perspectives, experiences, different approaches, and this can really lead to more creative and more effective solutions. Also, I think that it's important that there is a really broad participation so that the talent pool is really strong. And we can't afford really in engineering, where we are really seeing some global skills shortage. We cannot afford to exclude underrepresented groups, because I think that we lose so much talent and we lose actually that diversity that really can make sure that the STEM sector can flourish. I think that we have to fully utilize all available human capital. So all diversities for me are important in engineering. And, if I look at myself, I think that probably the most important diversity that I observed when I went to university was not immediately gender, but was the fact that I was coming from a very rural, modest town and facing the reality in a big city like Naples, being in a class with people who grew up in a completely different environment than mine, that really opened my eyes. And I could see things probably in a different way from what they could see, and they could see things differently from me. So I think it's that diversity of approach, diversity of views that really make engineering so relevant like it is.
Yes, that diversity of mind. And of course, that wards off any risk of groupthink, which can result in some major gaps in knowledge and perspectives. On the education point, because you said it starts with the very stubborn perception that engineering is a masculine professional, masculine field. One criticism levelled at the teaching of certain STEM disciplines is that they're not taught in ways that are very relatable or relevant to many students. The implication being that perhaps if they were taught in a way that highlighted the many amazing real world applications of these subjects, from space travel to medicine to climate solutions, they might attract a wider range of students, both men and women. Do you think that could be said of chemical engineering?
Well, I think that definitely in a chemical engineering, there is still the perception that we deal with bad, dirty chemicals. And I think that probably we still have a little bit of background thinking that chemical engineering is oil and gas. And I think that we have a bit failed to really show what is the diversity of the discipline and how many things a chemical engineer can work on. I remember that when I used to go to do outreach in schools, I was asking children, what do you know about chemical engineering? What do you think a chemical engineer does? And of course, I mean, they didn't know what to say. And I said, well, what did you do first thing this morning? And they said, well, somebody said, well, I brushed my teeth. Somebody said I had a cup of tea or milk. And they said, well, that's chemical engineering. So I think that relating what we do to the real world and the food and drink industry, the pharmaceutical industry, all the opportunities that chemical engineering can give are not so clear to everyone, and especially to the teachers, I think, that should guide children towards what that profession would be. And I think that that is why we are also doing a lot of work at the ICME to make sure with the Discover ChemEng campaign to make sure that children can see the variety of application of chemical engineering and then can choose in a very informed way. Because I think that at the end of the day, I don't want to compare everyone. I want just that children are aware of what the opportunities are out there. And I think that we have failed by showing in engineering what really engineering solutions do to everyday life.
In practical terms, what do you think does need to change then to attract and retain more women? We've touched on some of the problems around perceptions of masculinity in terms of the profession, retention of mid-career academics and researchers, and indeed the resulting lack of women in leadership positions. So what practical things might help address those key problematic points?
Well, support and mentorship. Yeah, support and mentorship. We need also the policy, but support and mentorship are the two things that really are important, I think, when one feels that cannot progress or feels somehow discriminated. I think that the culture, the environment where we work, that is absolutely important. And sometimes if that the culture is not exactly what can help us towards our career, I think that it's for us just to look for support in people who are more similar to us. I know that probably in this way I'm saying that we don't include diversity in our circle, but I think that sometimes to have the opinion of a critical friend, to have a mentor that can help us in making some difficult decisions, but also I think to give us the strength that is required to progress and to find our way in our career. I think that's probably can make a huge difference. Sometimes people believe that since we have a policy for flexible work, let's say, that really the problem is solved. And if we can tick the box and comply with all the policies that are there, problem solved. That's not the reality, actually. And I think that this is why that human aspect, that interaction with our peers and with people who are close to us in terms of supporting us can really help a lot.
Also, I can see that can help throughout the entire career journey, whatever stage you're at. In chemical engineering specifically, a lot of progress has been made on getting more women studying these subjects and going into this as a career option. I believe the proportion of women in this area rose from just 7.7% in 2010 to nearly a fifth by 2021, which suggests that when you entered this field, women would have been very, very scarce. How did this affect you and your approach to this career?
I think the family environment influences all of us. And I was fortunate because my mother was a very strong, decisive figure. So I had a very strong female figure in my mind when in front of me when I grew up. But also, my brother was hopeless with practical stuff. And in fact, eventually, like I said, he went and became a well-known Italian philosopher. And I had much more aptitude for technical and practical matters. And my dad really encouraged that attitude that I had. So I think that growing up with this understanding that I could solve technical stuff gave me confidence. And I think that confidence is really crucial. So if we are self-confident and we work hard, I think that we can succeed. And that was very clear from the very beginning. However, when I entered my engineering class, there were only 5 women in my first day in my class. And then within the first week, the number dropped to 3. And at the same time, many people from the town where I grew up doubt that I could ever graduate in engineering. I think I'm the first female engineer graduating from my hometown. So rather than discouraging me, actually, I think that these experiences in a way strengthen my determination in terms of success. I have to succeed. And that has been the mindset that really has helped me a lot in approaching my career. And I have to say, if I look back, I recognize that during my career, I had a combination of luck and also I was a bit blind. I was very fortunate to encounter supportive role models. And also I was lucky to find myself in the right place at the right time. However, I was unaware that there were risks out there. So I was so unaware of the risk that I took the risks without anticipating what the obstacles could be. And I was also blind because I was not very much aware of something that later on I was much more aware of, like discrimination. I thought at the time, and probably 10 years ago, if you asked me this question, I was telling, well, I don't think I have been discriminated in my career. I don't think that there was discrimination against women when I started. Now, I don't know if that denial helped me, but I thought it was, for me, a combination of luck and blindness that really shaped my approach to my career.
Yeah, that's a very modest take. Let's maybe not overlook the hard work, determination, and talent that I suspect lies behind your so-called good luck. I do, however, think what you say about almost being unaware that the fact you were a woman might count against you in some context. Possibly I can see how that might have been a strength. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss and means that you can proceed uninhibited by such concerns. I have already mentioned that you were the first female professor of chemical engineering in Scotland, but you are also now the president of the Institute of Chemical Engineering, and this heralds the Institute's first female president and CEO pairing. What do you hope to achieve by the end of your year-long tenure?
I don't want to have an excuse here, but I have to start by saying that 1 year, I believe it's not long enough to deliver really radical change. So, what my approach has been is just to build on the achievements that my predecessors have done, and also to make sure that there is continuity after my term is over. So, in my presidential address, I really said that I had three priorities and was attracting more diverse talent to make sure that the role of an engineer is strengthened, at least the perception of the role of engineer is strengthened. And also, I wanted to reinforce our code of conduct and ethics. So those priorities seems to be disconnected, but actually they are very much linked. So I have been working hard, and I hope that I'm at least partially successful in making sure that we give a better perception and information about what an engineering career is, so that we can attract diversity, but also we can support the people who are coming into the profession. So I'm supporting the Discover Chemeng campaign, and especially for the Discover Chemeng campaign, one of the things that I wanted to do during my presidency is do it live, because in the past we have done this mainly online. And I wanted to really tackle the geographic areas in the UK, like, for instance, the northeast of Grangemouth, next to me here in Scotland, where the chemical industry has declined, and perhaps young people do not see like chemical engineering something that can provide them with a job. I feel that there are geographical areas also where socioeconomic challenges are there and needs to be tackled. So I want to make sure that by reaching socioeconomic backgrounds where people do not probably see what chemical engineering can do for them, that will help them towards an informed choice. The other thing that I really wanted to do during my presidency is to recognize that there are non-traditional routes into engineering, and then to make sure that we do nurture these non-traditional routes into engineering, like apprenticeships. If we are clear and show what accessible routes are for reskilling also our workforce, I think that that really would be a great improvement.
Finally, what would you tell your younger self if you were embarking on a career in chemical engineering today?
If I could start again, I would again do chemical engineering. So I think that's the positive thing. But what I would tell myself is that chemical engineering offers many opportunities that probably when I started, I couldn't see. And I would say look beyond traditional career path and explore less conventional roles. And I would tell myself work more across different disciplines, including also the social sciences, and be open to new perspective, broaden your professional possibilities. I think that Also, I would tell myself, don't think in silos and look for a much more flexible career, because I think that probably if I look back, yes, I had a beautiful career, but it was all mainly in academia. So probably to young myself, I would say, be a little bit more open to do something probably which is a little bit different from what you had in mind, but also I would say push for equitable and sustainable innovation. That is the core of what we should do as chemical engineers.
That's a great message to end on. Thank you so much for speaking to me today, Raffaella.
Thank you. Thank you very much.